Hello everyone, welcome to Nightmare Echo. I know most of you use this video to sleep, so relax and drift off as we begin. The rain falls quietly outside. Soft. Steady. Almost comforting. But behind that stillness, lie stories that may keep you awake long after the last drop has fallen. 6 cases. Each one more disturbing than the last. And every one of them, real. It begins with a child, 6 years old, found lifeless in the basement of her own home on Christmas morning. The ransom note had already been written. But no one ever claimed responsibility. No arrests. No charges. No justice. JonBenét Ramsey. Her name still echoes across headlines, decades later. Then, there's the case that brought an entire continent to a standstill. A family on holiday. A seaside apartment. Their daughter, Madeleine McCann, tucked safely into bed. And then, gone. Without a sound. No trace. No answers. And in California, a predator no one could find. He struck in the dead of night. For years. A pattern. A name whispered by victims who survived. The Golden State Killer. He eluded capture for over 40 years, until one woman's obsession with the case pulled at threads even the police missed. And what unraveled, stunned the world. In 1989, 5 teenage boys were arrested in New York City for a brutal crime in Central Park. They confessed. They were sentenced. But the evidence never added up. The truth, hidden in plain sight, would take years to uncover. And when it finally did, the damage had already been done. The Central Park 5. Now known as the Exonerated 5. And then. Colorado. 2018, a young pregnant woman texts her friend, "Chris won't answer me." Hours later, she vanishes, along with their 2 daughters. Her husband pleads for help on camera. Says he's heartbroken. But behind that carefully rehearsed face, was something else entirely. The Watts family murders. A story that shook even seasoned investigators to their core. Finally, one of the most watched cases in modern history. A young couple sets out on a cross-country road trip. Their van becomes a symbol of freedom. Their social media posts show smiles, laughter, adventure. But something is wrong. Gabby Petito. Her last moments captured. Her final days examined by millions. And her fiancé, the only one who truly knew what happened, refused to speak, until it was too late. These are the stories we'll tell tonight. Stories that have haunted families, baffled investigators, captivated the world. And while the rain falls gently in the background, you'll hear every detail. Every twist. Every moment of dread. In the next 2 hours, you'll experience 6 of the most disturbing true crime cases ever told, layered with rain sounds to help you drift, while your mind stays wide awake. Story 1. December 25, 1996. Boulder, Colorado. The Ramsey family home was quiet after a long night of holiday celebration. JonBenét Ramsey, 6 years old, had just competed in a local Christmas pageant. She wore a red dress, smiled for photos. Her parents, John and Patsy, hosted a gathering at their home that evening, champagne, laughter, the warmth of the season. By all accounts, it had been a good day. They went to bed late. Sometime in the early morning hours, something happened. At 5:52 a.m., a call was placed to 911. Patsy Ramsey's voice was frantic. She told the dispatcher her daughter was missing. There was a ransom note on the staircase. She said they had searched the house. She said they couldn't find JonBenét anywhere. Police arrived minutes later. They noticed no immediate signs of forced entry. The Ramsey house was large. Multiple floors. Winding hallways. By the time investigators arrived, friends and neighbors had already been called. The house wasn't secured. Evidence, if any, had already been touched. And then, 7 hours after the initial call, JonBenét was found. Her father, John, discovered her body in the basement. He picked her up, and carried her upstairs. She had been strangled. There was duct tape across her mouth. A garrote had been fashioned from one of Patsy's paintbrushes, found nearby. Her wrists had been bound. There were marks on her body. She was wearing a white nightgown. The basement where she was found was a little-used storage room behind a wooden door. Some investigators later said they never thought to search it. Others believed it was an obvious place to check. But it was the note, 2.5 pages long, that truly stood out. It was handwritten, using a pen and notepad from inside the home. It demanded $118,000. The same amount John Ramsey had received that year as a bonus from his company. The writer referred to themselves as a small foreign faction. The tone of the letter was strange, oddly formal in some places, theatrical in others. It was unlike anything detectives had seen before. Handwriting experts were brought in. They determined the note was likely written by a woman. John Ramsey was ruled out. Patsy Ramsey, however, could not be definitively cleared. From the beginning, the investigation took two paths. One pointed inward, toward the Ramseys themselves. The other, outward, toward the possibility of an intruder. There were signs both ways. A basement window had been found ajar. A spiderweb stretched across the frame, unbroken, which some said meant no one had come through it. But others believed the window had been disturbed. A suitcase was positioned just beneath it, as if to provide a step up. Inside the kitchen, a bowl of pineapples sat on the table. Undisturbed. Tests would later show pineapple in JonBenét's stomach, suggesting she had eaten it shortly before her death. But her parents claimed they hadn't served her any that night. Their son, Burke, said he might have had some, but couldn't remember. In the weeks that followed, the media descended on Boulder. The public speculated. Talk shows, tabloids, national news. Everyone had a theory. Was it the parents? The brother? A stranger? But no one was ever arrested. DNA evidence collected from JonBenét's clothing showed an unknown male profile. It didn't match anyone in the family. And yet, the source of that DNA has never been identified. The grand jury convened in 1999. They voted to indict John and Patsy for child endangerment and obstruction. But the district attorney declined to sign the charges, citing lack of evidence. Years passed. Patsy Ramsey died of cancer in 2006, still insisting on her family's innocence. John Ramsey moved away. Burke, now an adult, made rare public appearances. He gave an interview in 2016, saying he wanted to move on. He never discussed that night in detail. In 2008, Boulder police officially cleared the Ramseys of any involvement. But many still questioned the decision. Some believed the case had been mishandled from the beginning, crime scene compromised, evidence lost, key moments missed. Over the decades, new investigators have revisited the files. There have been documentaries, books, and expert panels. Each one trying to piece together the last hours of JonBenét's life. Was it a break-in? A kidnapping gone wrong? An accident? Or something else? And why, after nearly 3 decades, has no one been charged? JonBenét Ramsey was laid to rest in Georgia. Next to her half-sister, who died in a car accident years earlier. Her grave is small. Her name etched into the stone. Beneath it, the words, "Love in our hearts forever." She was 6 years old. A pageant winner. A daughter. A sister. And no matter how many theories have come and gone, one truth remains. Her story is not over. Because somewhere, someone knows what happened in that house. On that cold December morning. Before the headlines. Before the photos of crime scene tape and flashing lights. She was just a little girl. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey. She loved dress-up. Glitter. Ribbons in her hair. She had a soft voice, always cheerful in home videos. In front of the camera, she danced and posed like she'd seen in pageants. But off stage, she was quiet. A little shy. She liked tea parties and bedtime stories. She didn't like the dark. Some of her earliest interviews were taped for family memories, her answering simple questions, smiling through missing teeth, asking her mother if the camera was still on. She was 6. Too young to understand the world watching her. Too young to know her name would be remembered, not for a crown or a song, but for something no child should ever be part of. In the days after she was found, her parents, John and Patsy, appeared on national television. They sat side by side, their voices steady but tired. They asked for help. They asked people to look out for someone acting strangely. But the questions didn't stop. Did they know more than they were saying? Why had they refused to speak to police separately at first? Why did Patsy wear full makeup during interviews so soon after her daughter's death? To many watching, it didn't add up. But others saw something else, 2 grieving parents under a microscope, their worst day replayed over and over again in public. In private, they were said to be devastated. Patsy kept a photo of JonBenét in her purse for the rest of her life. John kept silent for years, until his wife passed away. He later said the investigation had destroyed what remained of their family. And through it all, the questions never stopped. No fingerprints on the note that could lead to a suspect. No conclusive evidence to bring charges. The case file grew thicker. The answers stayed just out of reach. But today, more than 25 years later, there's movement. In recent months, investigators confirmed they were exploring new technologies. DNA extraction methods more sensitive than anything available in 1996. Possibilities that could re-examine even the faintest trace left behind on clothing, tape, or cords. A hope that, buried inside the aging evidence boxes, there might be something small. Something overlooked. Something no one saw the first time. Because all it takes, is one match. One name. One connection. And the mystery that's haunted Boulder for nearly 3 decades could finally shift. But that answer, it hasn't come yet. And as the years go on, JonBenét's memory remains frozen in time. Forever 6. Frozen in photos. In videos. In questions still whispered by strangers who never knew her. What happened that night? Who wrote the note? And why, in a home full of people, no one heard a sound? But across the country, in another quiet town, another child went missing. This time, from a vacation apartment, just a few steps from where her parents were sitting. And like JonBenét, she, too, was never seen again. Story 2. Praia da Luz. A small coastal town on the southern edge of Portugal. Whitewashed buildings. Cobblestone streets. A place where tourists come to escape. To relax. To forget the world for a while. It was May 3, 2007. The McCann family, Jerry, Kate, and their 3 children, were staying at the Ocean Club Resort. A family-friendly apartment complex with tennis courts and a tapas restaurant just steps from the front doors. That night, Madeleine McCann, 3 years old, was put to bed alongside her younger twin siblings. Her parents tucked her in. Then, as they had done each night of the trip, they left the apartment to have dinner at the nearby restaurant with a group of friends. They were close, just across the pool courtyard. Every 20 to 30 minutes, one of the adults would return to check on the children. At 9:05 p.m., Jerry McCann made his round. He entered through the back door. Everything seemed quiet. At 9:30, another friend, Matthew Oldfield, offered to check on Madeleine while checking his own children. He said the door was open, but he didn't step fully into the room. He assumed the children were asleep. At 10 p.m., Kate McCann returned. She opened the door to the bedroom. And Madeleine's bed was empty. The window was open. The shutters raised. The front door, they later said, may have been unlocked. In that moment, everything changed. Kate ran back to the restaurant. She shouted that someone had taken Madeleine. Resort staff were alerted. Guests began searching. But it had already been at least an hour since anyone had last seen her. Local police were called. But the initial response was slow. The apartment wasn't sealed. People came and went. Potential evidence, footprints, fingerprints, fibers, was trampled or lost. Word spread quickly. Within hours, news crews began arriving from Lisbon. By morning, the story had crossed oceans. A blonde British toddler vanished on holiday. Flyers were printed. Search dogs were brought in. Volunteers combed the streets, the beach, the brush. But there was no sign of her. And then the questions began. Why had the children been left alone? Was the apartment visible from the restaurant? Did anyone see someone enter, or leave? Witnesses came forward. One woman claimed she saw a man carrying a child in pajamas, heading toward the street around 9:15 p.m. Another recalled a van parked near the apartment that seemed out of place. Descriptions were vague. No faces. No names. As the days turned to weeks, police began to focus on those closest to Madeleine. Robert Murat, a British-Portuguese man who lived nearby and had offered to help translate for police. He was named an arguido, a formal suspect under Portuguese law. His house was searched. His mother defended him on live television. But nothing connected him to the disappearance. He was eventually cleared. Attention shifted again. This time, to Jerry and Kate McCann. Questions grew louder. Why didn't the twins wake up during the commotion? Why had the window and shutters been opened from the inside? Were there inconsistencies in the timeline? Portuguese police theorized that Madeleine had died in the apartment, by accident or otherwise, and that her parents had covered it up. Sniffer dogs alerted to the scent of blood behind a sofa and in the trunk of a rental car the family used weeks later. But no body was ever found. The evidence was inconclusive. The case stalled. In September 2007, the McCanns were officially named suspects. The British media turned sharply. Some accused the parents of deception. Of knowing more than they were saying. Months later, the Portuguese Attorney General cleared them due to lack of evidence. They returned home. Still no closer to knowing what happened. Over the years, new leads surfaced. A man spotted on the beach. A photo from a traffic camera. Tips from across Europe. Searches were relaunched. All ended the same way. But then, more than a decade later. A name. Christian Bruckner. A German man. Convicted of multiple crimes. A history of violence. He had been living in Portugal at the time of Madeleine's disappearance, just minutes from the Ocean Club. In 2020, German authorities named him as a suspect. They believed Madeleine was no longer alive. They said they had evidence, though they didn't reveal what it was. Bruckner denied involvement. He remains imprisoned on unrelated charges. So far, no charges have been filed in connection to Madeleine's case. Kate and Jerry McCann have continued searching. They started a foundation. Held press conferences. They never stopped asking. Where is their daughter? Madeleine would be 21 now. Her bedroom at home was never changed. Books on the shelf. Toys left where she last played. A pink comforter. A stuffed animal by the pillow. A photo of her smiling. Eyes wide. Still innocent. Her case has spanned continents. Involved private detectives, multiple police agencies, and now international prosecutors. And still, no one knows what happened during that small window of time, between 9:05 and 10 p.m., on a quiet vacation night in Portugal. But there is one hope that remains. In 2023, German investigators said they had identified new leads tied to mobile phone records. Locations. Calls. Movements. And if those connections hold, they could place one man, exactly where he shouldn't have been. But as of tonight, Madeleine McCann is still missing. There's a photo, taken just hours before she vanished. Madeleine McCann sits by the pool. A sun hat on her head. She's smiling. The water sparkles behind her. Her cheeks are pink from the sun. It's the last known image of her alive. For the world, it became a symbol of innocence, of what was lost, of a question that still has no answer. Jerry and Kate McCann have spoken carefully in the years since. They've faced criticism, suspicion, endless questions. But they've never stopped speaking to one audience, their daughter. Kate once said, Madeleine, we love you. We miss you every day. And we will never, ever give up. They still mark her birthday. They still imagine what she'd look like now. What she'd be doing. What books she might read. What songs she might like. Time passed, but they held on to one thing. Hope. Even when the investigation stalled. Even when public attention faded. Even when it would have been easier to walk away. In 2023, that hope stirred again. A team of investigators returned to Portugal. This time, to a quiet, forested area near the Arade Dam, about 30 miles from where Madeleine disappeared. They brought sonar equipment, drones, forensic tents. The lake had been mentioned before, by someone who claimed it was a place of interest. But this time, the search was more targeted. For 3 days, they scoured the area. They cleared brush. They examined the water's edge. And then, they found something. Reports described it only as a number of items of interest. No details were released. No conclusions announced. But the soil samples, the objects recovered, were sent for analysis in Germany. And in a case where every moment has been dissected for over a decade. This was the first real movement in years. What they found might hold a clue. A trace. Something that connects one man to one night. In one place. And if that connection is proven, then, for the first time since May 3, 2007, there could be an answer. But the results have not been shared. And so, the story remains open. The light in Madeleine's bedroom is still left on. Her family still waits. And the world still watches. Coming up, a killer who watched from the shadows. He left no name, no warning, just fear. He disappeared. And for decades, stayed hidden in plain sight. But all it took was a message board. And one woman who wouldn't stop digging. Story 3. It began with a series of break-ins. Small homes in quiet neighborhoods. Suburbs just outside of Sacramento. The 1970s had settled in with backyard barbecues, unlocked doors, and late summer evenings that felt safe. Until they weren't. He came silently. Windows were found open. Drawers rummaged through. Photographs taken. Sometimes, only food was missing. But then, it escalated. In June 1976, a woman in Rancho Cordova reported being attacked in her home while her husband was away. She was blindfolded. Bound. The man said little. He knew her name. He knew the layout of the house. He disappeared before police arrived. Within months, more women came forward. The details were the same. They hadn't heard him come in. They couldn't describe him. There were no fingerprints. By the end of 1977, over 24 women had reported being assaulted in the same way. Same methods. Same precision. Then, couples started being targeted. He would wait for the husband to fall asleep. Then enter the room with a flashlight and a knife. He tied them both up. He placed plates on the husband's back and warned, "If I hear anything move, she dies." He would then lead the woman into another room. And for the next hour, he would take his time. The fear was no longer isolated. It spread across entire counties. Neighborhoods organized watches. Hardware stores couldn't keep deadbolts in stock. People who had never owned a gun bought one. And still, he kept going. Police believed they were looking for a man in his 20s. Lean. Agile. Someone with military training. Someone who planned. He hit different cities across California. He became known by many names. The East Area Rapist in Sacramento. The original Night Stalker in Southern California. The Visalia Ransacker in the Central Valley. No one knew they were all the same man. By the 1980s, the crimes changed again. Now, he was killing. In 1980, a young couple in Ventura was found dead in their bed. Their wrists still bound. Their home showed no signs of forced entry. Over the next few years, more were killed. Some bludgeoned in their sleep. Others chased from their homes. One woman was killed while her toddler slept in the next room. Each time, he left behind terror. But never a name. Never a face. Detectives retired. Case files collected dust. Evidence sat boxed in back rooms. For decades, no one could piece it together. Until one woman did. Michelle McNamara. A writer. A researcher. A mother. She wasn't a police officer. But she had something else, obsession and time. She collected records. Created maps. Spoke with survivors. Wrote detailed notes and theories in the dark, quiet hours after her child went to bed. She gave the killer a new name, the Golden State Killer. As the days turned to weeks, police began to focus on those closest to Madeleine. Robert Murat. A British-Portuguese man who lived nearby and had offered to help translate for police. He was named an arguido, a formal suspect under Portuguese law. His house was searched. His mother defended him on live television. But nothing connected him to the disappearance. He was eventually cleared. Attention shifted again. This time, to Jerry and Kate McCann. Questions grew louder. Why didn't the twins wake up during the commotion? Why had the window and shutters been opened from the inside? Were there inconsistencies in the timeline? Portuguese police theorized that Madeleine had died in the apartment, by accident or otherwise, and that her parents had covered it up. Sniffer dogs alerted to the scent of blood behind a sofa and in the trunk of a rental car the family used weeks later. But no body was ever found. The evidence was inconclusive. The case stalled. In September 2007, the McCanns were officially named suspects. The British media turned sharply. Some accused the parents of deception. Of knowing more than they were saying. Months later, the Portuguese Attorney General cleared them due to lack of evidence. They returned home. Still no closer to knowing what happened. Over the years, new leads surfaced. A man spotted on the beach. A photo from a traffic camera. Tips from across Europe. Searches were relaunched. All ended the same way. But then, more than a decade later. A name. Christian Bruckner. A German man. Convicted of multiple crimes. A history of violence. He had been living in Portugal at the time of Madeleine's disappearance, just minutes from the Ocean Club. In 2020, German authorities named him as a suspect. They believed Madeleine was no longer alive. They said they had evidence, though they didn't reveal what it was. Bruckner denied involvement. He remains imprisoned on unrelated charges. So far, no charges have been filed in connection to Madeleine's case. Kate and Jerry McCann have continued searching. They started a foundation. Held press conferences. They never stopped asking. Where is their daughter? In 2016, Michelle's work was published online. It reignited interest. Brought attention to the DNA that had been stored for years. And it made one question louder than ever. Was he still alive? Michelle never saw the answer. She died unexpectedly in 2016. But her book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, was published posthumously. And it inspired one last push. A small team of investigators, armed with decades-old DNA from a crime scene, submitted it to a public genealogy database. They didn't need a direct match. Just a relative. The results came back. Distant cousins. Family trees. Connections leading to one man. Joseph James D'Angelo. A former police officer. A man once trained to catch criminals, had been one himself all along. He had lived in the same areas where the crimes occurred. He had been fired from the force for shoplifting. And after that, the crimes had intensified. In April 2018, surveillance confirmed his identity. Officers collected DNA from a discarded tissue found in his garbage. It matched the samples from multiple crime scenes. D'Angelo was arrested in front of his home, at the age of 72. He had a wife. Children. Grandchildren. He said nothing. Just looked down. After 40 years, the Golden State Killer had been caught. During the trial, survivors and families of victims finally spoke in one room. Many had waited their entire adult lives for that moment. One woman described being just 15 when it happened. She told the court she never truly slept again. That every creak of the floor still made her flinch. That she would never forget the sound of his voice. Another spoke of the man she was supposed to marry. Murdered beside her in their home. She survived, but described it as a life in pieces, never quite whole again. One after another, voices filled the courtroom. Some were calm. Some trembling. Some angry. But all of them had held something in for far too long. And he remained silent. He sat in a wheelchair. Eyes low. Unmoving. But investigators confirmed what many suspected, he had been faking frailty. At night, in jail, he was seen lifting himself easily from bed. Pacing. Eating normally. Completely aware. He had watched the world change while pretending to disappear into it. In August 2020, Joseph D'Angelo was sentenced. He admitted to 13 murders. He acknowledged dozens more assaults. The courtroom was still as the judge read his fate. Multiple consecutive life sentences. No possibility of release. Outside the courthouse, one woman placed a photo on the steps. A picture of her sister. Smiling, before it all happened. She said, "He took everything. But today, I take something back." The path that led to his arrest had started in the quiet corners of a writer's mind. In her notes, Michelle McNamara once wrote, "You'll be silent forever, and I'll be gone in the dark." She was right about the first part. He will never walk free again. But the full truth may still be incomplete. There are questions that weren't answered in court. Cases that remain unsolved. Names that have not been confirmed. And files that are still open. Even with a conviction. Some families still wait. And they're not alone. Because sometimes, a single arrest only opens more doors. Coming up. They were just teenagers. 5 boys. Accused of an unthinkable crime. The public turned against them. The headlines were relentless. But years later, a truth emerged that changed everything. Story 4. April 19, 1989. Central Park. A young woman goes for a run. She doesn't come home. Her name is Tricia Maley. A 28-year-old investment banker. She's found hours later in the early morning darkness, unconscious, beaten, left for dead. The attack is brutal. Her skull is fractured. Her body shows signs of having been dragged, restrained, and assaulted. She is rushed to the hospital in critical condition. The story spreads fast. By sunrise, newspapers are already calling it the crime of the century. A city that was already on edge, grappling with rising crime and fear, now wants answers. And they want them fast. Police detain a group of teenagers from Harlem. 5 boys. The youngest is just 14. They're questioned for hours. No parents. No lawyers. Some don't even understand why they're there. By the time morning comes, the boys have all confessed. Each confession slightly different. Names don't match. Details don't line up. But the tapes are recorded. And that's all prosecutors need. The boys are charged with assault, robbery, attempted murder, and rape. They are labeled as wild, dangerous, out of control. One newspaper calls them a wolf pack. The term sticks. Television reporters replay their taped statements. None of the boys speak about legal representation. None talk about evidence. Just vague, confused answers. They say what the detectives told them to say. There is no physical evidence linking them to the scene. No blood. No fingerprints. No DNA. But that doesn't matter. The city has made up its mind. The courtroom is full. The atmosphere tense. Public opinion is unforgiving. Politicians call for the harshest penalties. Some even suggest bringing back the death penalty. The trial ends with convictions. Yusef Salaam. Kevin Richardson. Antron McCrae. Raymond Santana. Corey Wise. All found guilty. Sentenced to years behind bars. As young as they are, their childhoods end there. Inside prison, time moves differently. Corey Wise, the oldest, is sent to adult facilities. He faces the harshest conditions. Isolation. Violence. Loss. The others serve their sentences quietly, always maintaining their innocence. They are branded as liars. Few listen. Most have forgotten. Then, over a decade later, something shifts. It's 2002. Corey Wise is still behind bars. He crosses paths with another inmate, Matias Reyes. A man already serving time for multiple assaults and a murder. Reyes tells Corey something no one expects to hear. He says, "I did it. Alone." Investigators look into the claim. Reyes knows details only the perpetrator could have known. The timeline matches. His DNA is tested. It's a match. The samples from Tricia Maley's case, left untouched for years, now point to a single man. Not the 5 boys. Not any of them. 13 years too late, the truth finally comes out. When the convictions were vacated in 2002, there were no cameras waiting. No parade. No one offering to give them back the years that had been taken. Each of them had returned to a world that had already moved on. Job applications. Housing. Relationships. All of it shaped by a past they never deserved. They weren't just boys when they were accused. They were boys when they were taken. By the time they were free, they were men. Older, but still carrying what had been done to them. In interviews, some struggled to speak at all. Others held back tears while recalling the nights alone, the names they were called, the years lost to something they didn't do. Corey Wise said little at first. Then one day, he said, "You can forgive, but you never forget. You live with it." Eventually, the city settled a lawsuit filed by the men. Money was awarded. Apologies were issued. But there are things that can't be calculated. Innocence doesn't come with interest. Time doesn't return when the truth arrives too late. Today, they're known not for what they were accused of, but for surviving it. Advocates. Authors. Speakers. Their names carry a different meaning now. Not victims. But voices. Still, the case remains a reminder of what can happen when the system moves too quickly and listens too little. But just when the country thought it had heard the worst of it, another case would erupt. This one wouldn't involve a courtroom at first. It would begin with a smile. A family photo. A husband who spoke to the cameras, while holding on to a secret far more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. Story 5. August 13, 2018. Frederick, Colorado. Shannon Watts returns home just after 2 a.m. She's 34 years old. Mother of 2 little girls, Bella and Celeste. 17 weeks pregnant with her 3rd child. Her friend had dropped her off after a business trip. Everything seemed fine. By morning, she wasn't answering calls. She missed a doctor's appointment. Didn't respond to texts. Didn't open the garage door. Her shoes, usually worn daily, were still by the door. By early afternoon, her friend calls the police. The responding officer wears a body camera. The footage would later become some of the most watched in modern true crime history. Chris Watts, Shannon's husband, opens the door. He's quiet. Calm. Cooperative. He says Shannon told him she was taking the kids to a friend's house. He shrugs. Offers a few sentences. Unlocks her car. Mentions they'd had an emotional conversation the night before. But something isn't right. The officer notices that Shannon's phone is still in the house. Her purse is there. Her car seats, still buckled in the vehicle. Chris shows no urgency. He doesn't ask many questions. His tone is even. By the next day, Chris is on television. He pleads for his family's return. Says he just wants them home. He shifts from foot to foot during the interview. Avoids eye contact. Behind the scenes, investigators have questions. His story doesn't add up. The timeline is too clean. The details too vague. They ask him to take a polygraph. Chris agrees. The examiner asks him straight. Did you physically cause Shannon's disappearance? Chris says no. He fails. After hours of questioning, he finally breaks. But his first version of the truth is incomplete. He claims Shannon killed the children, and in a rage, he killed her. Investigators press harder. They don't believe him. And then, they check the neighbor's surveillance footage. It shows Chris backing his truck into the garage. Multiple trips back and forth between the cab and the house. Loading something heavy. Early. Quietly. Before daylight. There are no signs of anyone else leaving the home. With mounting pressure, Chris gives a full confession. He tells them everything. What happened. Where he put the bodies. And why. Shannon Watts was a mother who shared everything. Photos. Videos. Messages. Her daughter's laughter echoed across her social media. From matching outfits to birthday songs, she captured it all. She spoke about her pregnancies. Her marriage. Her gratitude. In each post, she looked proud. Grateful for her children. Hopeful for the future. Bella was 4. Celeste, just 3. Both had favorite songs, favorite snacks, routines they knew by heart. They called their unborn brother Nico. They were preparing to welcome him into the world. In one of the final videos Shannon shared, Bella sings to her father. "My daddy is a hero." She smiles after every line. That video would later be played in court. The room went still. What the world didn't know, what even her closest friends couldn't see, was that something inside their home had already begun to collapse. Chris had started a relationship with someone else. He was withdrawing. Shannon had noticed. In her texts, she expressed confusion. Worried that something was wrong. She wrote about trying to fix things. To reconnect. She never suspected he was capable of what he ultimately confessed. Chris admitted that in the early hours of that August morning, after Shannon returned from her trip, he confronted her in bed. He strangled her. Then, with his daughters still alive, he drove all 3 bodies to a remote oil site where he worked. There, he ended the lives of Bella and Celeste. Each child was placed inside separate oil tanks. Shannon was buried nearby in a shallow grave. Forensic investigators recovered the bodies after days of careful search. The process was slow. Painstaking. Autopsy reports confirmed what no one wanted to believe. The final moments of each child were marked by fear. During the trial, prosecutors described Chris Watts as cold and calculating. A man who wanted a new life, without responsibility. Without his wife. Without his children. He received multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. There would be no appeal. No deal. No chance of release. Even behind bars, letters poured in. Some offered sympathy. Others asked only one question: why? There has never been a clear answer. The Watts family tragedy became more than a headline. It became a study in deception. In the space between what is seen and what is real. Today, Shannon's parents raise awareness about domestic violence. They speak her name. They remember Bella, Celeste, and Nico. Not for how they died, but for how deeply they were loved. But before the world could begin to process that horror, another story would emerge. This time, it played out across the country. A couple on a road trip. Smiles for the camera. Moments captured in real time. But one of them would never come home. Story 6. Summer, 2021. Gabby Petito and her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, set out on a cross-country trip. They traveled in a white van, converted for the road. National parks. Scenic views. They shared it all online. Gabby was 22. She posted smiling selfies. Time-lapse of nature. Clips of her and Brian laughing together. Their YouTube channel was meant to capture the journey. But the final chapter was never posted. In early September, Brian returned home. Alone. No word. No explanation. Gabby's van was in Florida. Gabby wasn't. Her parents, living in New York, hadn't heard from her in over a week. They reported her missing on September 11th. What followed became one of the most widely followed cases in the internet age. Viewers retraced the couple's posts. Reddit threads, TikTok videos, amateur sleuths. Everyone wanted answers. A crucial clue surfaced from Utah. August 12th. Moab police had pulled the couple over after a 911 caller reported a domestic dispute. The body cam footage was released. Gabby is seen crying. Her voice is soft. Her hands shake. She describes an argument. Brian, meanwhile, is calm. Chatting with officers. They're separated for the night. No charges are filed. That was the last confirmed sighting of Gabby alive, by law enforcement. Days pass. Brian offers no help. His parents say little. Then, something shifts. Brian disappears. The Laundrie family says he went for a hike in a nearby reserve. He never returns. As authorities search for Gabby, another family unknowingly records a moment that changes everything. On a scenic road in Wyoming, a travel vlogger captures a white van, parked awkwardly off the side. No movement inside. The timestamp matches the days Gabby was believed to be in that area. Investigators follow the lead. September 19th. Near the Spread Creek dispersed camping area in Grand Teton National Park. They find her remains. The terrain is remote. The campsite was familiar. They'd been there just days earlier. The autopsy confirms strangulation. The coroner estimates she died 3 to 4 weeks before her body was found. The country holds its breath. News outlets track every detail. Protests form outside the Laundrie home. Criticism grows over the police response. Why wasn't more done in Utah? Why did Brian walk free for so long? The manhunt intensifies. Dogs. Drones. Swamps. But weeks pass without a trace. Then, in October, partial remains are discovered in Florida's Carlton Reserve. Nearby, a notebook. A backpack. Dental records confirm the identity. It's Brian Laundrie. A self-inflicted gunshot wound. He'd been dead for some time. Inside the notebook, the FBI later reveals. He claimed responsibility for Gabby's death. There is no trial. No courtroom. Only a closed loop of grief, questions, and speculation. In her last YouTube upload, Gabby is seen brushing her hair beside a canyon wall. She smiles into the camera. Edits clips of her and Brian cooking dinner by a campfire. Their voices are warm, their laughter gentle. The footage is full of light, but it stops without warning. At the same time those moments were posted, Gabby was texting her mother every day. Little things. Photos of sunsets. Messages that she was safe. Until one message didn't sound like her. And then, nothing at all. Her mother would later say she knew something was wrong, not by what was said, but by how quiet everything became. When Brian's notebook was recovered, it held a single narrative, his own. Written on a page smudged by water, he described taking her life during what he called a moment of mercy. He claimed she was injured. That she had asked him to end her pain. But that account could never be questioned. He would never explain it. He would never face the families. The facts. The consequences. Gabby's parents have since dedicated their time to helping others. They speak at schools, support domestic violence advocacy groups, and push for early intervention. They say the warning signs were there, just hard to see from the outside. And still, the question lingers. Did anyone truly know what was happening inside that van? Did the cameras only capture half the story? And when the footage ended, what else was already too late? Even now, with both of them gone, so many questions remain. 6 stories. 6 lives, forever changed. Each case left behind more than headlines. They left echoes. Questions. Unfinished conversations. From the unanswered cries in the Ramsey home. To a child gone missing during a quiet vacation. From victims who never saw justice. To the wrongly accused, who lost years to silence. We saw a smiling father who concealed the unthinkable. And a young couple whose love story ended in a wilderness grave. The names stay with us. Because these weren't just cases. They were people. Daughters. Sons. Friends. Strangers. Victims and survivors. And tonight, while the rain continues. Maybe you're still wondering. Could any of this have been prevented? Did anyone speak up too late? Would you have seen the signs? Tell me what you think. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Because sometimes, the answers come not from silence, but from those willing to keep the story alive. If you found these stories compelling, if they stayed with you, please like this video. Subscribe for more true crime told with care, precision, and respect. And if you're still awake, there's another story waiting for you, right here on the screen. Stay safe. Stay aware. And remember, some questions only sleep when we stop asking.